What if the symptoms you thought you just had to live with during your cycle, cramps, fatigue, mood swings, were actually fixable? Today, we explore how women can stop dreading their period and start reclaiming control with Dr. Josie Phillips-Ross. Dr. Josie Phillips-Ross is a licensed pharmacist and the founder of Phillips Family Pharmacy in Kansas City. She's also a certified functional medicine practitioner with advanced training in hormone therapy, specializing in safe and personalized solutions that go far beyond one-size-fits-all prescriptions. She helps women move beyond just managing monthly symptoms, guiding them towards real hormonal balance that supports clearer thinking, steadier energy, and a cycle that no longer gets in the way of life. In this episode, she will help you recognize the signs your hormones may be out of sync, understand what real solutions look like, and set a new standard for what you should expect from your cycle, mentally, physically, and emotionally. Welcome to Well Wave Now, your portal for actual wellness insights. We, Brett Grice, Dr. Bob Levine, and I, Tim Daniels, are your wellness catalysts committed to elevating your health, enhancing your functionality, and optimizing your performance at every life stage. Welcome to Well Wave Now, where timeless wisdom lights your wellness path.
So welcome to the show, Dr. Josie. Great to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to see you again. And let's jump right into it in women's health and specifically when it comes to menstrual cycles, right? So what are women really going through?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a wide range. I talk to females every single day, so wide range of symptoms, typically starting with weight fluctuations, mood changes, fatigue, cramps. Those are pretty typical, quote unquote, normal symptoms that women experience.
And so, so how many women are impacted through this? And I know I was planning on Dr. Bob wasn't going to be able to join us, so I'm glad that he was able to. But he always wants the data. You know, yeah. He's the data scientist. So, you know, how many people really are impacted on this, and it affects their day-to-day life? And where is the data behind that?
Yeah, so I'd say if we're just talking strictly PMS symptoms, it's generally like 75 to 90% of women will notice some type of symptom. And that is anything from a slight headache to severe cramps. It's a vast majority of women.
Okay, and then as you look at that, the percentage of it, well, with a couple of things, what else is going on sort of mentally you mentioned some things. What happens also, you mentioned the weight gain, you mentioned headache in there. What else are some of the most commonly reported symptoms, whether they be physical or affecting the brain or emotional cycle?
Yeah, so cognitive decline, like during parts of your cycle where progesterone and estrogen are affected, you'll have cognition issues. You'll have, obviously, the main thing is mood fluctuations. So many women will notice the mood fluctuations during each phase of the cycle. There's even digestive issues that can be reported. Bowel movements, inconsistency, constipation, those type of things. Even bloating is a very common one for most women too. There's many things that are encompassed in the term PMS as far as mood, as far as symptoms go.
And you said cognitive there. Give me a feel for that. What happens? Is it just is it brain fog? Is it speed of processing?
Memory, recall, brain fog, just feeling like it's slower to come out, things are slower to recognize. Those are all fairly common depending on what your hormones are doing during each phase of the cycle.
Can they correlate some of these symptomatic expression with the hormonal changes? Is it pretty predictable, or is it all over the place?
Yeah, I'd say every woman is different in what they experience, but you can kind of tell during each phase of like when the estrogen is increasing, when the progesterone is increasing, these types of symptoms are really common during those phases. Severity is what differs between patients. So we'll see major changes in severity. And I always address like with patients, what are their top 3 issues or symptoms so that you can kind of address those first.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
And so what would you say? I don't know if I'm asking this question the way I really want to, but I'm gonna ask it this way. So these things happen. So are they common things that say 98% of menstruating women go through, and they should just take it as normal? Or so when does it go beyond something normal to something that should be addressed?
Yeah, good question. So I would address this in like subtle symptoms, like not affecting your daily life, or severity of symptoms. So if it's actually affecting your life, your family factors, your work life, your mood is very unstable throughout each, that's when you kind of need to address it. If they're affecting your daily life, it should not, because actual symptoms throughout your cycle should be subtle.
So, Breck, anything you want to explore at this point?
No, I'm glad that you asked that question of, where does it go beyond the normal, right? Because I think, everyone's a little bit different and, some people experience, their cycle a lot different than others. But at some point they've got to ask, is this normal or is this abnormal when, they're not even able to function, go through their daily routine. It's just too miserable for them. So I'm glad you asked that.
Yeah, and I would say this has been a big change, because I remember when I first started going through my cycle, girls would miss school all the time based on severity of symptoms. And that was very normal and common when I was growing up. And so I think that we've gotten out of that mindset of like, okay, what is actually normal in this sense, and what should we treat or look for root causes of?
So appreciate that. And that gives me a good thing I have to remember to ask in our next segment. Our next segment, we're going to really explore what can women really do to reclaim that balance and why suffering is not something they have to settle for. But before we do that, this what came to mind is when you mentioned that girls missing school. How early should this intervention take place? I want to understand that girls are experiencing menstruation even and sometimes very early these days, even as early as 10, 11, or 12. Should you be intervening at that point, do you think, if they're having problems that have them missing school, or should you wait? What do you think?
Okay, so great question. That's kind of a twofold answer, I will tell you. So based on what I know now, how I'm treating even my 3-year-old daughter, like there are changes that I'm making in her everyday lifestyle, factors that I'm taking into place for endocrine disruptors, taking those out of her environment, as many toxins out of her environment as possible, making sure nutrient wise, she's supported. So there's things that I'm doing that I'm hoping will make her have a more positive outcome of when she does start cycling. So yeah, I would say anytime your daughter is, even a child, teens, going through all of those phases, there's many things you can do on top of treatment, lifestyle factors that you can look at to help hormones.
Yep.
Yeah,
Great. So
let's name them. So what would you do dietarily, and let's talk about movement, sleep, anything that would help keep the balance in hormones.
Yeah. So first I look at your environment, like the things that you're around the most, toxin wise, taking those out of your everyday life. So I look at parabens, phthalates, and any type of personal care products, anything I'm putting on her, fragrances. I'm not having Febrezes or candles in her environment at all, unless they are specific, beeswax candles. Those are completely taken out. Synthetic foods. There's a lot of things in synthetic foods that can change your hormones, as well as your glucose balance, and insulin plays a large role with hormones. So I think it's really important to hone in on blood sugar balance for children. Many are eating processed foods nowadays, stripped of nutrition, so most of them are constipated. So supporting nutrition in order to increase fiber and make sure that they are having consistent bowel movements, that plays a large role with hormones that people do not understand.
So give us two things.
Yeah.
You're a Kansas City freight train there.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
You ask it.
Slow you down and make you a passenger train so we can
Yeah.
make you a New York commuter train. Okay.
Yes.
So two things at the start of that. You mentioned peregrines, and I think you said phthalimide or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I have those correct, well, tell me if I have those two things you mentioned correctly, and whether I do or not, relate what they are.
Yeah, so there are chemicals that are called endocrine disruptors that are disrupting your hormones. And these are everyday products, pesticides, fungicides, and your personal care products that are typically synthetic toxins that are affecting your cycle. So if you think about it, 50 years ago, normal cycles started around 15 to 18. Now our cycles are starting even earlier. They can notate that due to all of these toxins in our environment. So that's number one for me. When I went to functional medicine school, that was the first thing I did for the environment of my daughter. I worry about everything that is put on her body, everything that she is around. Obviously, there's tons of things that we cannot get away from, right, in our environment. But in your house, you can have air purifiers, you can have clean products and for lotions and deodorants and stuff like that, and cleaner organic foods. Like those all play a role with your hormone health.
What about something as commonly used as a fabric softener, like those dryer sheets? They have a fragrance to them.
They have a fragrance to them, yeah. And fragrance is a terminology that really can, there can be a lot of things in the term fragrance. So that's one of the things that we look at as an endocrine disruptor.
Wow. Yeah, I saw something on that, and in two products that I know were in my house that somebody mentioned were, commonly had things in them that aren't great for the environment. I'm like, oh, I have those very things, one in my laundry room and one, in my kitchen. So yeah.
Very common. Detergents, any type of detergent, dishes, laundry. I make sure that those are clean if they're touching my daughter's clothes or skin.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts about 5G effects on menstrual cycles?
Yeah, I mean, that's new data, I would say. Obviously, there is lots of things related to cancers with 5Gs, but I think the data is still new and coming out. But I would absolutely assume harm, especially with the towers. And I mean, everyone's on devices nowadays, so we don't really know where the test population for what's the outcome's going to be.
Yes, we're still gathering all the information. Yeah.
Now, we've got a comment from the audience, like to get your thinking on. The comment is soy milk is an endocrine disruptor or disruptor. What's your thinking on that, Dr. Josie?
Soy, there's a couple of different ways to think about it. Soy is typically useful in menopause, but it can increase estrogens in people's cycling. So it can induce a estrogen dominance, which is really common nowadays, mostly due to insulin resistance that we're seeing at such a young age and blood sugar dysregulation. But it can be useful in certain populations. But typically in cycling females, not as much.
So you talked a lot about eliminating certain things, right? But what about diet? What is there any certain foods that are going to be helpful?
Yeah, so with all of my cycling females, I take a hard look at sugar, added sugar. Because in hormone, obviously we've talked about blood sugar dysregulation. Yeah, people do not understand. And even when I hear healthy diet, like on one of my sheets, they fill out a 3-day diet. And it's a journal. And almost every patient that I have thinks they have a healthy diet because I feel like we have been advertised to think we do have healthy diets with all of our packaged products. But I would say, how many whole foods do you eat in a day? Whole foods, grown. How many? Most people would say 0.
Now,
So
in my day in the Midwest, Dr. Josie,
mhm.
a meal was not a meal without bread or dessert. So now you're trying to tell me that I can't have a good Midwestern meal and have, if I'm a female and have my cherry pie and lime pie and apple pie. I can't
Balance it. Balance is the key.
Mhm.
Yes, eat it at
If
the
you
end of the
start
day.
those meals with high protein and high fiber, you can balance the sugar intake at the end of the meal.
Yeah, my first shocking experience of a Midwestern dinner, and there was a stack of white bread on the table and a thing of butter, and you just slap butter on white bread and you ate that with your meal. Then I thought, oh, that's kind of cool, but today, man, I'm like, wow, that was really not that healthy.
Butter in moderation is good. I still eat some butter.
But
And
I grew up with a home ec teacher, so think about, like, she had cake contests and sugar and everything. So that was that was a hard thing to look at for me too.
right now, what you should have had along with that bread, Breck, is not just butter. It should be jelly on the table too. Or some
High
jelly.
fructose corn syrup.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we're going to have to read about those meals in the history books, okay?
And if
Hopefully we're moving past that. Hopefully.
when
Yeah.
when I take you to Nebraska, we're going to have corn cob jelly on that too.
Yep, exactly. So what about movement? That was one of my other, questions. Where can movement fit in? Walks, exercise, where does that fit in?
Yeah, so for my family, what I've implemented for my daughter is after dinner, we move. So whether it be we go downstairs and walk on the treadmill and do a little workout, or we go outside, ride bikes, like movement is key for balancing your blood sugar. And I don't think a lot of kids are getting that, right? We're sitting in front of tablets and social media and all of those things now, a lot of sedentary lifestyle, which is obviously causing a lot of issues in our not only hormonal health, but health in general.
Okay. So I took you off track there for a little bit, on the sugar track.
Yeah.
So I understand we've talked about why should one not have, are you taking out the added sugar? Is it just for obesity? Is it just for general health? How does that tie specifically to the cycle issue that we're addressing today?
Yeah, so typically increase in sugars will implement a rise in blood sugar, right? With that rise in blood sugar, you can either have cortisol issues, you can have estrogen issues. So top things that we see now are estrogen related. So whether it be from diet and added sugars, or from endocrine disruptors, or environmental estrogens, we would say. There's estrogens potentially in meats and dairy products, and even in our drinking waters. So that's typically a problem. It's the imbalance between estrogen and progesterone that can cause a lot of issues, especially with PMS. And I'm not cutting out all sugar. I'm not saying we need to get on this health train of cutting out all sugar. I'm saying I don't think people understand the amount that they're eating, right? So if you take I have patients track for 3 days. Give me a hard focus on like I'm not into 100% tracking everything, but give me 3 days and let's see what you're really getting in fiber and sugar and what's normal. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it's very shocking for almost every patient.
So when lifestyle habits and diet and movement and all of that is still not working, when is the time to look at hormone therapy?
So if you're still cycling, hormone therapy is a last resort, because I want your hormones to work effectively. So we're going to figure out the root cause of why they're not, right? Why they're not going in a cycle. I mean, PCOS comes into play here, and that's where insulin resistance comes into play, and non-cycling females when they're supposed to be cycling. I have hormone replacement unless you're in perimenopause as a last resort for PMS patients. There's many nutrients. Obviously, we are a nutrient deficient society, so replacing nutrients would be the next thing on my list after we've addressed lifestyle factors.
Okay. And what is perimenopause, Dr. Josie?
Perimenopause is the onset of menopause, which can be anywhere from like 10 to 15 years from actual menopause. Menopause is actual 12 months without a period. Perimenopause is typically the first thing to see decline is progesterone. So you'll typically start to have higher anxiety, more sleep issues, weight fluctuations, and then mood kind of follows that. But that's what perimenopause is. It's a hot topic right now, too.
Yeah, that's astounding that it could be 10 to 15 years before actual menopause sits in. It's a pretty wild.
It's your body's basic way of saying, like, should I still be ovulating? Should I not? Like, it's kind of this phase of, and typically we follow the mother on when they went through it, which I'll tell you about over half of my patients have no idea, or their mothers had, hysterectomies, but we follow the mother and like time-wise when they went through menopause.
Yeah, we're at
and
that.
That's getting earlier too. So talk about hormone disruption.
Yeah, we're coming out of the age, but there was that time period when the mother didn't share any of that information with the daughter. But we're finally now getting to a more open discussion around that, I think personally. But I know my own mother-in-law, you can't even say boobs without her going bright red and not wanting to talk to anyone anymore. So
yeah, they're the generation of suffer in silence, unfortunately.
Yeah. So go ahead, Tim.
So we've got down now sort of the challenges, some of the solutions, like, lifestyle, and a lot of things from diet to exercise to removing toxins to balance. Now, with the solutions you have and approach, what should be the expectations of women out there as to how well they can perform during their cycle? Should they be able, with what you put on the table and help them with, should they be able to perform like Simone Biles and do these backflips and be at the height of mental attention and acuity? What's a good expectation, Dr. Josie?
So I would say this is a very individualized approach, right? So even some of I have consultations with mothers and like 13-year-olds, going through nutrition, going through nutrients, going through all of that kind of stuff. Very patient-centered approach. But I feel like when you're on the other side of things, you should have very subtle symptoms. Like you should not notice things as you're going through your cycle. You should be able to track. You should be able to know when things are happening and what's happening at each stage. I think that's super important and something we did not learn as in any part of our schooling. Going through high school and all of that, it just was not talked about. And I think that that's really important. So when a woman knows like what phase they're in and how they're supposed to be exercising and eating and how they feel, I think it's a lot easier for them to be in tune with their body. And I always say that the patient obviously knows their body the best. And so we take a symptom-based approach. You can test hormones, but they're going to be different every second of every day. So we take that with a grain of salt. And then there's 3 different ways to test hormones. So you kind of have to go with what you're looking at. That's kind of how I treat patients, very individualized. But yes, yeah, you should have very subtle symptoms throughout if everything is balanced.
Let me ask you this question. What about stress in general? I mean, and what about automatic stress responses? Like some of the women I've dealt with who have really serious menstrual problems, as soon as they get the signal that it's happening, it's starting, they're in the, oh no, this is a big problem, and they just take themselves right into trouble. And so, what do you think about
the stress response is huge, especially with females. Like we have a million things on our plate and a million running to-do lists going on. And adrenal dysfunction is something I see very often. It plays a large role with hormone disruption. And I tend to tell women, like, your cortisol response doesn't know the difference between a notification on your phone or you running from a tiger. So take that into account, right? You're responding the same way, right? That shouldn't be the same response. That should not get your cortisol increased. And then I also have patients where we track their glucose that's high all the time despite their diet. Then you need to look at your cortisol response because it automatically brings up your blood sugar. And that's a survival technique. That's supposed to happen, but women have no idea that this is affecting everyday life. And another big part of that, and I know this is a little bit off topic, but when I talk to females about libido, like they're hard focused on testosterone, I'm hard focused on cortisol, hard focused for females because it plays a bigger role than testosterone.
So take us through that freight train Ross. So cortisol, people, we've talked about it in a number of our episodes, but I don't want to assume that everybody has tuned into those and understands it. So tell us in this context, which you just went through, what does cortisol cause? When is it good? When is it bad? When's it need to be balanced like you were going through? But just kind of preface that or go into some detail with us on what cortisol is.
Sure. So your normal cortisol wave should be highest first thing out of bed in the morning, and then throughout the day it should go down. When it's at its lowest point is when you'll match the melatonin, and then that'll go through the sleep-wake cycle. And so that's a normal cortisol response. Gives you energy.
But what is, yeah, go ahead. Yeah. So what is cortisol?
So cortisol is typically driven from this, how much do you want me to go into detail? The sex hormone cascade, right? That's why it plays a large role with your hormones because it is made from cholesterol, which is where all your sex hormones are made, then driven from pregnenolone, which is the mother hormone. Then things can kind of be pushed down progesterone, cortisol route or over to your estrogen, testosterone, DHEA route. So it is a survival hormone. It regulates many things in the body, on top of temperature regulation too, weight. There's a lot of weight issues that come with cortisol dysfunction, but it is a survival. It keeps you alive. So it's very important. When I talk to females, productivity is our main objective for most of them, and they're constantly thinking of how many things they can do at once. Well, that's constantly giving a cortisol response. So there's typically 3 phases of cortisol or adrenal dysfunction. And the first phase is where everything is very heightened. So a heightened response, sweaty palms, like heightened blood pressure, those types of things. And then there's so much time that can be spent at that phase before it goes into phase 2 and starting noticing some symptoms and issues there too. Then there's also phase 3, which is burnout.
So, Dr. Josie, I'm going to have you take off your functional medicine MD hat, put on your pharmacy doctor hat for a minute. And what are some solutions over the counter or even compounded supplements that you might find effective for your patients?
Okay, are we talking adrenals? Are we talking hormones? Are we talking all of it?
We're talking whatever you want to talk.
All of it, basically this is, you're the PharmD here in the room, and tell us what you would do. Are there beneficial OTCs or over the counters, or do you go to something specific to the patient in a compound?
Yeah, so I look at basic nutrients first. So magnesium, B vitamins. B vitamins are a cofactor in many things, especially like methylation and liver detoxification. So all of our nutrients that we're eating out of a bag are stripped of nutrients. So this plays a big role in our standard American diet today. So nutrient deficiency is huge majority of the population, I would say. Then we look at like vitamin D, omegas, those types of things. There's been a lot of studies even with B vitamins related to helping PMS symptoms. So that's literally a cofactor, right? So if you're thinking if that's going to be an easy fix, where is our nutrition at and where does it need to be at? So that's really common. Adaptogens is what we typically use for cortisol dysfunction. But it depends on what phase you're in, treatment based, or what we can gather which phase you're in based on the adaptogens. So there's many different nutrient based, and then there's also herbs that'll help, like maca, black cohosh. Like there's things that are used. Rhubarb extract is used for menopausal patients. So there's many things that can be used, but I typically look at nutrition based first because that can be causing a lot of problems.
Okay.
And one toxin we didn't talk about that you need to address is alcohol.
Ah.
Okay, well, let's address it. What
Alcohol can increase estrogens and detoxification pathways. It increases your risk of breast cancers and any type of issues there. Basically tenfold every drink past 3 a week that you have.
Okay, thank you for covering that. Well, still ahead, we are going to go into, known treatments that are safe and what red flags to look out for, and why women never get the help they need until they ask the right questions. So right after the break, this episode is brought to you by Better Alt, committed to supporting and enhancing well-being. So Dr. Josie, how many people do you think have a mineral deficiency? A lot.
99%.
Yeah. That's always Dr. Bob's response. Yeah, basically everyone, 99.9999%. So according to independent studies and PubMed.gov, this supplement has 87 of the 102 trace minerals your body needs to survive. It can improve energy levels. It enhances cognitive function, supports healthy aging while boosting your immune system. It's the USA's #1 brand of pure Himalayan Shilajit by Better Alt, available at thebetteralt.com, GNC, and other fine retailers. I also have a special for those that are watching on TikTok. We'll leave a note in the TikTok shop and also a note here in our show notes as well. So Dr. Josie, let's talk about safety and the realistic expectations of what women should look for in, cycle-related treatment plans.
Yeah.
And as we do that, you mentioned early on you would not recommend a hormone replacement therapy or bioidentical hormone therapy for standard cycle women, but you do it in potentially in the perimenopausal. So take us through that a little bit again and why, and then overall, as you work with women, how do you help them understand that what you want them to do is safe yet effective, and how do you make sure that is? Especially if we talk about supplementation. When we first met, Breck told you I had that ask compound question. I guess this is like a multi-compound question here, but also touch upon, even the supplementation you went in there. How do you make sure that the supplementation that you do is safe for the women?
Yeah, so definitely this is a different talk if you're in perimenopause or menopause, right? Because if we're considering actual hormone replacement at that point, then we would be looking at risk versus benefits, family history, alcohol intake, what your diet look like, how many bowel movements are you having. Those are all things that I take into consideration when dosing or prescribing hormones. And then if you're talking about like PMS and cycling, obviously birth control is the #1 Band-Aid that's being used right now. There's many different things. It's a synthetic estrogen and progestin, not progesterone, not bioidentical to what's in your body. That's putting a Band-Aid on it. And I'm not opposed to conventional medicine. I truly want the patient to know their options. And I want the patient to know what kind of side effects can be had, what it can do. Like a lot of people don't know that birth control is altering their gut microbiome. There's a lot of things that it can harm, but there's a lot of things that can help. So every patient needs to know the risk versus benefits of everything involved. And then as far as supplementation goes, testing is number one for me. Like, I want to make sure that patients are getting quality ingredients. Obviously, I'm sure you've touched upon OTC markets, and not a great quality of supplementation, but that's first for me. And then since there's not a ton of studies on safety and risk benefit or risk versus benefits, then I touch upon things that I know based on my functional medicine degrees, like detoxification, family histories. Like, I know what meds should not go together, like antidepressants and adaptogens typically don't. So there's other things that we need to use instead of that. So I hope that answered all the questions that you had for me.
Right, that answers all the questions. Your memory is better than mine.
Yeah, no, that was great. A great recap. And so when someone, I guess, what are the commonly missed signs, right? That somebody is out of sync with their hormones. I think our listeners, before you go run out and need to get a blood test and you need to check all of these things that we've talked about, what are some indicators that would be common? Hey, I may have an imbalance here.
Yeah, so how you feel in each phase of the cycle. So are you having bloating and digestive issues? Are you constipated during specific parts? Some of that could be subtle and common. Are you constipated the whole cycle? Like, that's not common. Well, it might be common, but it's not normal. But
Right.
that's typical fatigue. Like, when is your fatigue hitting? And I must preface, like, if you're getting lab testing, please go to a provider who understands each cycle and where your hormones should be at. Because every day of your cycle, there should be a different normal for blood work as far as a cycle goes. So if you're just testing your hormones and not knowing what phase you're in or day you're on, that plays a large influence on where the cycle and the hormones should be. So go to somebody educated about that, number one. Number two, I think, like we talked about in the past, like, severity of symptoms is playing the biggest role. Like, does it deter your daily normal routine in life? Is it affecting your family life? Is it affecting your work life? That's when things need to be addressed for sure. And then, like I said, we kind of go down the pathway of individualized medicine at that point.
And then I'm going to take you back a couple of thoughts back where you mentioned the pill as a band-aid. So what if I don't have a daughter, but I bring my daughter in to see you and taking the pill, and when she has the pill, she doesn't, they doesn't have cramps and she's thinking well and all that.
Yeah.
Why isn't that just good? Why isn't that just good enough?
Yeah, so that's why I said I'm not against conventional medicine, because functional medicine does not have anything better to prevent pregnancy. It's cycle tracking, it's knowing exactly where your hormones are, it's a lot more detailed, but there's not a specific supplement that is going to prevent that, right? So I'm on board. If your daughter wants to be on board, I want her to know, like, digestive things and things that we might be causing that you might not be aware of, like constipation, and like nutrient deficiencies. That's a big one. Like, that needs to be addressed, and all the risk associated and side effects need to be talked about. I'm not opposed to it by any means, but because the other alternatives are not great, right? You have to be very in tune, you have to be very good at tracking. So I'm not opposed to birth control. I'm just saying it does put a band-aid on some root causes, especially like insulin resistance. So if sugar is a really big thing, it's going to, have a band-aid approach to that being maybe the root cause of hormone problems.
Okay. Can you share any success stories for us? Are there any women that you can think of that went from just total suffering to stability?
Yeah, I mean, I can think of a few. I have some menopausal patients with, like, life-altering changes with that, but I had a 14-year-old patient, and she had some pretty severe insulin resistance and weight gain, severe symptoms with PMS. We did an overhaul diet, nutrients with supplements and all of that. And it took us about 3 to 6 months. She saw changes within the first couple of weeks, but with a 14-year-old, obviously, I don't want her to have issues with food moving forward. So we had to take the approach to get the whole family on board. Like, we're changing everything, right? To just offer it. So something that I implemented from birth with my daughter is we always offer fruits and veggies with every meal. Like, it's always on the plate. And I think that that's really important for parents to implement. Even though they might not eat them, they always need to be available. And protein always needs to be the focus of the meal. Carbs have always been the focus in the past of the meals. And so just kind of making those things changes. But from day one, she had gained 60 pounds when she started her cycles. She was a cheerleader, so that was very uncomfortable. And the weight in general led to fatigue and issues with being able to participate in sports. In about 6 months' time, she had lost about 50 of that and was back into like her vital cheerleading roles and was doing really great. And that was truly just looking at lifestyle. Me and her mom went through her whole daily routine, took out all toxins that could be playing a role. She was very aware when she went to school of what to pick and not pick, and definitely was able to have treats, but that was really transformative in her life.
Wow, for a 14-year-old to be able to drop 50 pounds is life-changing, I'm sure.
And not with a diet. Like I love to say, like, everybody's been on diets in the past. Like I don't want that moving forward, and I don't want my daughter to see me on diets. And so I think making better choices around whole foods and protein, and then getting that in their head so that maybe when they go off, they can implement that with their families is really important.
What you just took in there, I think, is a good way to go into our wrap-up segment here, which is, that was kind of a tip that you wanted all women to know. So let's broaden that and go on to what would you like to share women with at any age should know about reclaiming kind of the hormonal balance. And so what's that message you want them to walk away with, Dr. Joseph?
I would say, like, if you're being dismissed for your issues, if you're not feeling heard, especially if you want to test hormones and stuff like that, find a provider that knows the cycle and knows how to test and what to look for. But the big thing is, like, reach out, have questions, like, advocate for yourself. Like that's most important for me. I think that there's a big wave of that coming, and talking about perimenopause and menopause and hormone symptoms, because now it's all over social media. But I think there's a big wave of women really standing up for themselves and getting help for their symptoms coming.
Yeah, we're a bunch of guy co-hosts here, but we've had the discussion a couple of times on Well Wave now. So it is becoming more in light, or a light being shined on the topic. And how many patients that come to you have been ignored in the past? Is that a pretty common?
All of them.
Wow.
All of them. Yeah, you got to think, like, to look into functional medicine, you have to be looking for something else, right? Yeah. You've had to not get the answers from where you've gone, and you're searching for other resources. So yeah, all of them.
Have you found, does it matter if they've gone to female doctors, male doctors? Are they being ignored by both, and it's just the type they're going to? What have you found? And I'm as you think about that, I'm gonna preface that I actually, for a number of reasons, now since I was in my 20s, have gravitated towards female doctors because I have found at least to me, they tend to listen to me more, maybe because they don't get as many male patients, but right. They listen and they really dive in with me. So, but what have you found?
I would say both, just because you've even heard doctors that treat menopause now differently than they did in the past, just because I even heard a female doctor saying they used to call them whiny women, just complaining about their symptoms, but now they address them. So I think that movement and just having patients have an outlet that they can talk about their symptoms and that they're not normal is kind of coming. Like the days of just live with it are changing. So that's great when we're addressing like the younger population too.
And that's changing in the Midwest too. That's a tough, that's a strong environment. Just gut it out.
Yeah.
It's the men cowboy up to the women up, woman up. So, but you're saying that they don't have to gut it out anymore. Huh?
Yeah. I always say I have female and male patients. So when I talk to a man, we're talking about this amount of hormones. When I'm talking to a woman, it's this amount of hormones. So men are so much easier to treat for sure. Because you don't have a lot of like fluctuations and different things happening at different phases.
Yeah, it's so true. So for someone listening today that feels like they really haven't been heard by their provider, what would be the next steps to reclaim their comfort, clarity, and control?
Yeah, look into functional medicine. Reach out. I can help answer any questions. Look into all the things we talked about, like what changes you should make in your environment, what you should make in your diet. If those things aren't working, then the next step is to look into a different source for root causes.
Right. And just to add to that, what you said earlier about the advocacy, we have a series we call our wellness heroes. where people have gone through devastating things and got to the point of thriving. And a commonality in that is just what you said. Many of them were told it's in your head, or this is the best you can do, and they all took no. They all said they wouldn't take that for an answer. They wouldn't stand for no. They said there's got to be a solution, and they kept pressing until they found somebody that would listen to them and build up their own knowledge to be able to ask those better questions, like you said, get familiar and find someone who does understand what happens during the cycle. And so I think that's a very, very great point that you made there, and I just wanted to second and third that.
Yeah, excellent. And for our listeners, we covered this on your backstory, Dr. Josie, but where can they find you?
I'm typically at Functional PharmD Josie on Instagram, or on my website is Phillips Family Pharmacy.
Yeah, well, thank you. And Dr. Josie, you've shown us that menstrual cycles don't have to be a monthly sentence of discomfort. And whether you are facing cramps, mood shifts, fatigue, or confusion, your experience matters. And there are proven, safe, empowering methods to help you reclaim your rhythm. So thank you, Dr. Josie. It's great to have you on again. Great to see you, and for giving women the tools and the hope to live stronger, clearer, and more comfortably. And it's always great to have you on the show. We'll probably have to have you back because there's a lot more that we can certainly discuss. But thanks again for being our guest today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
I'm only going to have you back if you let me eat my apple pie and cherry.
We'll balance the glucose, and I'll let you have it. We'll balance it.
Yeah, all things in moderation, right?
Yep.
Well, until next time.
Tim, at the end of the meal, Tim.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Not like my sister that orders the dessert first because there's never room at the end of the meal for dessert. So
hard to argue that.
Yeah. But until next time, everyone, stay curious, stay empowered, and remember, wellness, it's in you.